Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I have a really special guest on the podcast with me. Listen, I'm making a lot of friends. Podcasting. I'm meeting a lot of new people. So, my new friend Emily Poe. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Emily, and then I'll let her properly introduce herself. So, Emily and I connected through a Facebook group that we're both in. For moms who are also entrepreneurs. And so we got connected when I was actually looking to bring on guests for this podcast. I had posted something, or actually, I think you had posted something and I commented on it. Either way, we got to talking. And then as we got talking, we actually a lot about all of Emily's gifts and that she actually changed careers and does something that aligns really well with what I do right now. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So it's a little sneak peek at that. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a little bit. But for now, Emily, welcome. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to share just some things I've learned along my very exciting journey over the past several years and the different roles that I've played and just bringing it all together into being able to provide some value to some people. I'm excited.
Yes, I can't wait. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. So first of all, you used to be a doula, and I'm really excited to have you on because a lot of people don't even know what a doula is, and they don't know, for those who do know it, don't realize how long your role actually plays out with families. So start off and explain to us, please, what a doula is and what a doula does.
Yes, absolutely. This was a question when I was working as a doula that I got all the time. I would say, "Oh, I'm a doula," and people would be like, "What is that?" And I'd forget that a lot of people don't know what a
Yep.
doula does. So basically, a doula is a non-medical professional support person for pregnant and birthing and postpartum people. So this is like mental support, emotional support, physical support, practical support, um, basically just guiding families from pregnancy all the way through to postpartum so that they can um, have the most successful experience, whatever that means to them. Um, and it's very personalized. It's very intimate connection that you have with your doula. And kind of like from what my perspective was, the kind of layer underneath it all is that we're not meant to do this alone. That parenting and having babies was never something that we biologically were meant to just go do by ourselves. And so it doesn't have to feel as hard. You don't have to do it alone. You can do it with a doula.
Yeah, I love it. And I personally didn't know that a doula's role really does extend past birth. So here in
Mhm.
a minute, you can tell us more about that. But first, tell us, how did you get into that? Like, what made you decide to pursue a career as a doula?
Yeah, so I had my son. I was pretty young when he was born. So I was 19 when he was born. So I didn't have a career really yet. I'd done a little bit of college, but it was never anything defined. And so once he was about 6 months old, I was looking to start a career of sorts. And I had an amazing birth experience with an incredible doula and midwives and lactation support and chiropractor, like the whole village.
Wow.
And they really made my experience, which could have been, statistically speaking, could have been a really terrible one. They made it something so beautiful. And I was
Mhm.
really inspired by that. And my mom actually had a patient who was a postpartum doula. And she came home from work one day and was telling me about her patient who's a postpartum doula. And it just lit this spark in me. It was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. And so the rest is history from there. I took a training and started learning. This is how most doulas become doulas, though. It's almost always after you have a baby of your own, you're
Mhm.
inspired to help other people do the same.
I love that. Amazing. So when you started working with couples or moms, kind of walk us through what it was like. Like you met some of them you probably met early on in pregnancy, and some of them you met, closer to delivery. But what were the main things that you did to support moms and dads through the pregnancy, and then just kind of how did it progress into delivery and past, into the postpartum?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely, the first thing was having that initial meeting, which usually was with mom, sometimes with mom and dad, and just kind of feeling out if we were going to be a good fit. It's definitely not one of those jobs that you just take any client that you can, um, because it's such an intimate space that you'll be in together, and you want to make sure that your personality fits, and that you guys have similar aligning values. So that was usually the beginning of it, just kind of getting to know each other, asking the right questions to see if it was a good fit. And then from there, we would spend some time together prenatally, preparing for birth and postpartum. So, trying out different exercises and stretches and learning, planning for birth.
Yep.
And then I think it was like 36 weeks, I would go on call. So that way they could call me whenever they were in labor. Um, and there's lots of logistics involved in that. But,
Mhm.
basically I would just show up whenever the time came and help them through that and the ways that we had planned. And yeah, and then most of my work was actually spent in the postpartum period. So a birth doula is a doula who attends births and does more of the prenatal and birth work. Um, and then a postpartum doula does more postpartum in like 0 to 6 or even 12 weeks postpartum. So a little bit of a different role there, but most of my time was
Yeah.
actually spent in the postpartum period with families.
That's awesome. And I think back after I had our son, my gosh, that is the hardest time of my life. It was the hardest time. It was such a you don't know how it's going to be until it happens. You can
Mm.
have everything planned, but eventually it just really depends on all these circumstances outside of your control, and the baby and his adjustment or her adjustment and the temperament, and just like I remember I got sick in the hospital, like just got a cold or something, and I had
Mhm.
not had sleep. Like I went into labor at night and then didn't sleep for maybe a day and a half, and I was exhausted, and then I got sick, and that made my postpartum transition really, really difficult. Like I was a disaster. Like I was just a hot mess of emotion and hormones, and then just like the adjustment was not anything that I had expected. And I had come from a
Yeah.
background of like I nannied and taking care of babies. I was like, this is gonna be great. It was awful, so hard. And I
Yeah.
think back to my support consisted of my mom and my mother-in-law, my husband. That was it. Like we didn't have anyone else to help. And then my mom eventually had to leave. My mother-in-law had to leave. So it was just my husband and I.
Mhm.
And I think, listening to what you're saying, I didn't know there was such a thing as a doula, let alone a postpartum doula. At the time, we're talking 11 years ago. But just imagining that support and what it would have been like to have someone come into the house and just, you know, guide us through these normal aspects of being parents, things that like we don't get that. We don't get as much support after, like take the baby home, good luck. So what
Yeah.
kind of things did you do? Like some of, maybe tell us a little bit about the main role you played in postpartum, and then like, well, let's start with that. And then I have a couple of story questions for you.
Okay, yeah, and thank you so much for sharing part of your story. It's really an experience that so many women share in the United States and other places as well, where it's just super unsupported,
Yep.
and it's really only going to go well if you have a seamless birth with minimal injury and no curveballs. Then maybe you'll come out on the other side okay. But
Mhm.
God forbid anything goes wrong. Like you said, you got sick, and that just can really change everything. Um, so I actually worked during the day and overnight, so I can share kind of both of those roles. But during the day, It looked like usually getting to the home and sitting down with mom and just talking about how the night went and refilling her water, just kind of getting caught up on everything that's going on. Um, and then usually making like some snacks and just tidying up the house. Sometimes caring for the baby while the mom sleeps, and um, walking the dog, just kind of keeping the house going, all those practical things that need to keep going, just helping with those tasks, and sharing information. So if mom's like, having a hard time with breastfeeding or bottle feeding, just kind of helping to coach her along that.
Yep.
And providing resources was another really big one. So making sure that they could get in touch with the right type of professionals that they needed. If they needed, for example, to see a lactation consultant, I'd make sure that I
Mhm.
knew the best one in town and would get them in touch with each other. Sometimes I would go to postpartum appointments with my
Hmm.
clients,
Wow. Yeah.
um, chiropractic appointments, and just kind of help in and out of the car and things like that. So
That's
and
amazing.
overnight it was mostly just baby care, so just taking care of the infant while the parents sleep,
Wow.
and also helping with breastfeeding and washing bottles and all of that stuff too.
That's amazing. That's yeah. Really the basic needs that every mom
Yes,
wishes that she would have. I love it.
yes,
So tell me a little bit about, my kind of work right now is really focused in with married couples with kids, and the focus really is on the marriage piece and just nurturing that relationship. And so can you think of any fun stories to share about just like what are some things you saw or experienced with new parents that you're like, wow, these are some common things that couples, maybe struggle with, or like this is some of the stuff that you really wish couples would have known going into being new parents, like how to support each other, how to be prepared for some of the personal struggles and then shared struggles, like just really let's just talk about some of the good stuff that you saw,
let's
I
do it.
guess. Yeah.
Let's get into it. Yeah, and there definitely was, ran on a spectrum like most things do. So there was some, experiences where I saw some couples who had a bit of an easier time, and then some couples who had a harder time. And I felt very honored and privileged that I got, that I was trusted enough to see into that, because I know it's a really vulnerable time, for parents to be in. So, yeah, I saw kind of both ends of the spectrum. I guess I could go into, what I feel like made one or the other.
Yeah.
Um, so, there was times when I would work with a family where, um, you could just I could tell that they knew each other really well. And I think that that's really what it comes down to. I wouldn't say that it's like the length of the relationship, or or even how many kids they've had before, more than it's just they know each other really well, so they know how to support each other. Like, they know each other's needs.
Yeah.
And I think knowing each other's needs, knowing your own needs, and being able to communicate that is like, if you have those things in place, those are the times when I saw couples doing the best postpartum, meaning that things are kind of flowing well, and there's a lot less like bitterness,
Mhm.
between like he's not doing this or she's not doing that. So that's, kind of the other side of the spectrum where one person feels really unsupported. Um, and and that really can be so many different things. Postpartum can be a really triggering experience, I think, especially for dads, because if the mom had a really traumatic birth, dad might feel like he didn't do enough, or that he couldn't protect her. And it was really scary. And then you go home and you're kind of expected to just like keep going about life. There's this huge dissonance between like what the heck just happened, and now family's here and they're holding our cute baby. but there's this like so much unprocessed stuff, and I think that's really unseen in dads specifically. So I think that's when I would see the most um, difficulty in the relationship, where dad just kind of felt like his role as husband had kind of evaporated into thin air, you know? And finding what his new role is, I think plays a big role. And I say that I focus mostly on dads because mom, you know, is down for the count in a good way. Not like
Yeah.
she's not okay,
Right.
but she's like, she's in bed, she's nursing, she's healing, she's recovering. So she's not doing much. She shouldn't be, at least.
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's why I focus so much on, like, you know, dad's experience, because he's kind of the more cognizant one in the postpartum period, whereas mom's really kind of bogged down with healing and baby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what I saw the most, and I think the one experience that sticks out to me um, was when I worked with one family, and they had a therapist that they were working with. And so when I would come over for my visits, I would, you know, they had twins, and I would take care of the twins while they went upstairs and did their therapy appointment.
Wow. Yeah.
But it brought up a lot of stuff for them, where she had a really traumatic birth, kind of like what I just said. She had a traumatic birth, and he was feeling like he couldn't do enough. And I think he had these beliefs around what he needed to do to be a good husband and to be a good father, but he didn't really know what to do. He wanted to help and he wanted to do more, but he didn't really know how. Um, and that was really hard for him. And so he started to kind of push away and isolate himself through that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's that was one kind of really moving experience, and I kind of helped the best that I could share tips with him without coming off like coachy or unsolicited, you know, um, to kind of help raise his confidence a little bit. But um, yeah, and I could share like practical tips for how to prepare.
Yeah.
Where should we go next? What
Yeah.
do you think?
Before you do that, because I think actually that's a really good idea. I love what you said. I love that you brought the dad into it, because where my mind went with that is that I think dads don't get as much support, right? I think for a lot of obvious reasons, but I think also they fall between the cracks. Like initially it's the woman went through the pregnancy, went through the delivery, the recovery, like the nursing if they're able to nurse, and just the bonding. Like so much of our emphasis is on the mom, which is very, very important. But then I think back to a lot of the men I've met with, spoken with, family members, my husband, like you're just in the supportive role when you're the dad, but you're also going through a whole lot of things. Like you're also exhausted. You're trying to connect and bond with this baby. You're trying to still maintain a relationship with your wife. You might be going through some adjustment things as far as role and support and what you wish, like the difficulty and the trauma. Like it affects both so much, but I think as a society, maybe we sometimes forget that the men need just as much support. It just looks different. The kind of
Mm-hmm.
support they need is a little bit different. So I like that you in your role notice that, because you're there. Your primary role there is to support all needs around baby and the transition and mom. But I love that you actually, it sounds like your perspective was more of that holistic, like the family unit and mom,
Absolutely.
dad,
Yeah.
baby, and maybe other siblings. And because it
Mm-hmm.
is like that initial period of time when you bring your baby home, how you transition into that new lifestyle, that new role, it really can set the pace for so many things for a while. Like if you come home and you're just, the couple is just really irritated and pissed off at each other and they can't communicate and they're not helpful, they're not supporting each other, they're both just kind of just struggling, that can really create this extended trauma, I guess, where now you think back and you're like, oh my gosh, it was such a bad experience when we brought our kid home. And that can, maybe unintentionally root itself into the marriage and become wound that doesn't like we don't see that it needs to be healed. We don't recognize that it's actually impactful. So I don't know. I just threw a whole lot at you. Does that sound
No,
like it makes sense?
yes, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of what we talked about when we first met, that there might be 5 years after baby, um, that there might be these like marriage issues, and they might stem from, resentment, or a lack of that transition, or a lack of processing, a lack of like you didn't process the grief from the birth experience or from that transition, and it's just built up over the years. And then because I mean, for a lot of families it has to be that way, because there's things that have to get done, like baby has to be taken care of, family mom's going back to work,
Yeah.
like you're going back to work after having your baby, like when is there time to process that experience? And I think that can most definitely translate into marital issues down the road. And so I would love if, this podcast gets out into the world and brings awareness to even one person of being able to track that, like, oh wow, this is when that started.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just to get that
And I think,
closure.
yeah, and girl, you and me both. I hope it gets out there. But I do think that a lot of the time I don't know, it's kind of like, I don't know if disappointment or letdown is the right words, but like we have this vision for what bringing a baby home will be like, and it's supposed to be this magical time, but it really is a pretty, even the most amazing moments are hard, cuddling with your baby is so sweet, but you're kind of exhausted at the same time. Like it's the little things as well as like if you have a baby that has, colic or something that they cry, colicky, colic, whatever. They cry a bunch and that's really, really exhausting. Well, that is an obvious struggle. But then if you have just I'm exhausted and I don't have much to give and I don't have much to give my spouse, like they're kind of silent stressors that we don't recognize are impacting us. And you made the point of the word resentment. I think that is it's an unfortunate side effect of adjustment. In any adjustment to anything in a marriage or in a relationship, it's how did we handle that? Did we get through that as a team, or did we really kind of, was it ugly? And you got firsthand experience at seeing the ones that went really well and the ones that didn't really go very well. And so, what are some of those tips that you were that maybe you can share about how to transition, and not just in that moment, but like things that we can learn from that initial time that we still can apply today in relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. So I think, on one hand, there's things you can do before baby comes, during pregnancy, to prepare for this. And then there's also some things you can do, like you said, during and after. So I would say beforehand, there's a book called The Fourth Trimester by Kimberly Ann Johnson that is an incredible book and has some really great information in it, for preparing and sustaining your relationship for postpartum. But I'll just share like some things I learned from that book, which is it really comes down to being intentional, as many
Mhm.
things in marriage and relationships do.
Yep.
Um, and taking the time to sit down before baby comes and just talk about, like, what are your biggest fears going into this? Like, what, are your biggest challenges you think you'll face? Like, are you someone who needs tons of sleep? Because if so, then that factor is going to be most challenging for you. How can we support each other in that? So just like
Yep.
identifying what you think are going to be the most challenging parts for you, and making a plan for how you'll support each other, or hire someone to help you, outsource what you need to. There's people that will come walk your dog. There's people that will deliver food to you. So just kind of making a plan for how you'll do that. Um, and my dog is snoring.
That's awesome.
um, I was like, what is that? You can do the same with like how you'll spend time together. That was another, like kind of how I mentioned my clients who had the twins. I would watch the babies while they went to have their time together.
Yeah.
And you can plan for communication. You know, how would you like me to communicate with you? Or these are things that have worked for us in the past. Let's make sure we do this. Just being intentional and mindful about what that's going to look like. Taking the time to really think about it, I feel like could go even a little bit of preparation can go so far with
Yep. Yeah.
postpartum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then afterwards, once baby comes, um, I think and again, these are exercises I learned from this book. And one that I really think is impactful is um, I forget what she calls it, but it's basically taking the time to sit down with each other, even if it's just for like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, just kind of checking in like 3 times a day and just being intentional about doing that. And then she also talks about intentional eye gaze, which I think is like so sweet and cute. But it's when you, for example, enter the room where your partner is sitting and breastfeeding the baby, like take the time to connect eyes with your partner and just check in. It's really easy because you are tired and um, processing so much information. It's really easy to just keep moving and to just fall into rhythms that aren't supportive to your marriage. So I think it's just intentionally taking yourself out of that. And even if it's as simple as locking eyes for a second,
Yeah.
um, it
I
can
love
make a
that.
really big impact. You know, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go on a date night, a year after baby's born.
Yeah.
You can do little things throughout the time. So,
I love that. And I think that's one of my favorite words is intentional, right? Because I think that
mhm.
anything that we do to take care of ourselves, to take care of our partners, take care of our kids, we have to be intentional. Some things work out by accident, but really the things that matter, we have to make a decision to do them and we have to prioritize them. And I love the simple examples of how to connect that you've given, because you really don't have the time or the energy or maybe the money to do a whole lot when your kid's first born. And so finding moments or seconds where you can be intentional in, eye contact, just sitting next to each other. We spend, one thing I always remember is like when you have a baby is skin to skin, right? So it's so important to do this with your baby, but like, it's the same with your spouse, holding hands, sitting next to each other, a hand on the shoulder, a hand on the knee. Like it's just creating a bonding moment that communicates so much. Just that nonverbal communication is so important. And also, I love how you use the word supportive a lot, because it really is about you're a team and you have to be able to support each other. It's not like, well, I need you to give me what I need, full stop. It's how do I support you, knowing that you are going to also care about how you're going to support me. Like there's trust there, there's security in knowing that we are doing this for each other, with each other. And that's how you get through a tough transition. And then, said, and applying it to literally every transition or adjustment throughout the kid's life or parenting in general. Like when your child goes through a sleep change or a food change or a growth change or starting school, starting daycare, behavioral changes, anything, like as parents, we have to be able to deal with that, and we have to support each other, because it's easy to just each person's kind of doing it their own way and it's not really working. You're not on the same page, and that can create this division or separation in that team. And that's it. Like now you're just kind of working through a struggle by yourself when you shouldn't have to do it alone. You shouldn't have to adjust to having a baby alone. You shouldn't have to adjust to all the other transitions alone. And you have this built-in support system with your spouse that you just have to learn how to use or nurture. And so many people, I think, get so caught up in I'm struggling that they don't take the time to realize we're struggling. What can we do to work through this together, whether it's going to therapy or just getting outside support from a doula or anyone. But yeah, it's like that is the first test of your marriage, in real tests, I guess, like of the barring other kind of bigger unexpected things, is like you've got to tag team this, the hardest thing you've ever done together, and then let's see how you do for the next 18 years. So you had a lot of firsthand experience in kind of seeing those first months or weeks, and then you had your own kiddo, and you have a son, and he's what, 6?
He just turned 6. Yes.
Yes. So I bet a lot of what you learned in your experience as a doula kind of shaped the way you even parent.
Yeah, it definitely did. It's, being a doula, they call it like mothering the mother. And so I do feel like a little bit of your parenting style goes into how you doula. So I did feel a bit of a connection there. Um, and that was really fun to explore. And it just was such a time of nourishment and nurturing, just like you would you're a baby. Moms and babies actually have very similar needs. They need warmth,
Mhm.
they need food, they need comfort, they need to be held. So they're not that different from one another.
Yep. Yeah. And I like that your role nurtured the mom, the baby, and the marriage, because you
Mhm.
took, you were able to give them the support so that the couple could then at times go and focus on their own relationship, which is really cool. I love that.
Yeah.
I bet
Yeah.
so many people are, when they remember their birth story or they're kind of bringing their kid into the world, they remember you. Like, how fun is
That's
that?
crazy. Yeah, that's crazy to think about, but it's so true. It's such like I was saying earlier, it's such an honor to be in that space because it's like one of the biggest experiences of your life, and to be the person who was chosen to be there for that is definitely an honor. And it definitely helps the marriage. I feel like it just relieves a little bit of that pressure off of it. Again, especially for the dads who feel like they're the only one there to take care of their wife who is in this super vulnerable state and just went through this really crazy experience, and they're like, oh my god, like they almost kind of, if you're familiar with like nervous system stuff, I feel like they
Mhm.
almost just kind of like freeze up because it's too
Yep.
much.
Yep.
It's like, I don't know anything about breastfeeding, I don't know anything about, stitches and like
Yeah.
cesareans, and like I don't know, but yet here I am, the only person here to really do that. Like, what do I do? So
Yeah.
I think that hiring a doula definitely can relieve some of that stress and
Yeah.
tension off of the relationship, so
Mhm.
that so dads can step into a role that feels a little bit more natural to them.
Yeah. And if I was thinking while you were saying that, my poor husband. So I was sick for like 3 weeks and I was emotionally a disaster. And like things didn't go, like nursing, none of that went the way I wanted it to. So that means that I was emotional, and my poor husband was trying to figure out how to like be supportive while I'm like crying and frustrated and trying to force a baby to nurse that doesn't want to nurse. And like, he was amazing, but because there were times where he very justifiably could have been really frustrated with me because I was just all over the place emotionally. I was
Yeah.
kind of being a brat sometimes because I think back to it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was crazy. I didn't intend to be crazy. I tried myself on overall trying to be pretty balanced, but not at that time. And so, to your point, like the dad is having to figure out how to play so many roles and wear so many hats, and no one's prepared for that. And so
Mhm.
we were all just, it was like the blind leading the blind through this really intense experience. But we
Yeah.
survived and we have an awesome child.
Good. Yeah. It's really, I have a similar experience where I was breastfeeding and I didn't know my son had a tongue tie.
Oh,
And so breastfeeding was
yeah.
really painful. And I remember like his dad, I woke up to feed my son. And I remember looking at his dad and being like, I'm gonna quit. Like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And
Mhm.
he was like, I don't know if I should encourage you or like if I should agree with you. He
Yes.
was just like, I don't know what.
Choose your
So
words wisely. They may be your last. Yes.
literally,
It's
yeah.
intense.
So
I love all your experiences. Okay, so fun twist to the plot, I guess.
Yes.
You changed careers. Tell us about that.
I did. So I was working, like I mentioned, I was working overnights, and I did that for about a year. And I am now a single mother. And so between that and working overnights just became extremely exhausting. And I burnt out really badly. And so,
Delivery?
I'm not sure.
Do you need to go check?
Let me go check and
We're
see what
taking
car.
a pause, so you're good. There's someone at Emily's. This is for all you listening viewers and not
Yeah.
watching viewers. You had to step away to see who's coming to the door or something. So I'm just gonna fill the noise with all my talking, being really. Oh, there goes the dog.
Oh, sorry, this was very unplanned. I'm gonna mute myself right quick.
You're good. This is real life, folks. We all have kids and dogs, so we know what we need to do. We just wait.
Just a was not important.
That's all good. We can cut that out.
Beautiful.
Really difficult. You work nights. Yeah.
Yes. So I had to make a hard decision to stop working as a postpartum doula. It was a really hard choice because it was something that I had done for so long and I loved it so much, but it just wasn't fitting my life anymore. So I've always been really kind of naturally skilled at marketing, and I had my own Instagram for my doula page and like constantly got compliments on my content. Um, and I also had worked for some doula agencies who had asked me to help them with like blogs and stuff like that. So I just kind of put that all together and started a digital marketing business. So that's what I do now.
I love it.
Yeah.
And lucky for me, so it was funny because you and I were talking, like we got through a whole conversation talking about what we wanted to do this podcast about. And then I was like, wait a minute, you do what? You're a marketing person? Like, I want to hear about this. I need you in my life. So we got to talking and now we work together. And that's the
Yes,
best
we
part.
do.
So I
It is.
lucked out. It was like a double bonus for me. Um,
Mhm.
but I've loved working with you. You have like you just and part of why why I wanted to work with you is that your personality just fit mine so well. Like, there's a lot of people out there, anyone listening to this who's in any kind of business, then there are a lot of people out there that try to get you, hey, here's our stuff, here's what we can do for you. But it's very salesy and it's not really, I kind of ignore or avoid a lot of that. But with you, I don't know. Your personality was just so natural. You know what you do. You're confident in what you do, but you're also just like a fun, easy, real person to work with and talk to. So it's been such a gift for me. And I'm gonna have to tell people about you, even though I don't want to share you. But that's okay. But I really appreciate also that you came on to talk to me about something that even though you don't do it anymore, you're not a doula anymore, it impacted your life and it affected, it's something that you've carried with you into your parenting and your work now. Most of the marketing work that you do, if I'm not mistaken, is actually with people like me who are in the helping profession, who are, therapists or coaches or work with other work in providing a service to people. So I think it just seems like it's kind of in you to really still be in a place in a career that is in that service, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I really believe like once a doula, always a doula. I think that it's not a job title, it's like a role that you carry for life. And I definitely see that play out in the way that I work and the people that I serve. The way that I view it is, like you mentioned, I serve helping professions. So I've actually worked with lots of doulas and maternal health, occupational therapists, and postpartum nurses. And now working with coaches, expanding my field a little bit with all kinds of things from writing blog posts to writing copy for websites to creating websites to making Instagram posts and all kinds of stuff. So the way that I see it is, for this period of my life, I really just crave to just kind of stay home and just use my skills and just grow as a person in other areas. But the way that I see it is the better that I do with someone's marketing, the better they and more they can help other people. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And so I like to help other people help people.
Yep. I love it. It's so cool. Well, this has been
Yeah.
really fun for me. I've loved hearing more about your story and your experiences. And I'm just lucky that you're in my life now. So I'm thankful for that. But thank you so much. And then what I'd like to do is I'm going to share all of your website, your Instagram, all of that in the show notes so that anyone who wants to kind of see what you do or work with you can find that. But thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate you being on the episode with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I absolutely love what you're doing and you are so talented and full of knowledge. So I can't wait for to be able to watch you help so many people and to be a part of that. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much. All right, girl. I'll talk to you later.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.